Hi, everybody. I'm here with Grant Weinberg, and we're talking recruiter enablement. So, Grant, first of all, give us a quick introduction.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me on today. So, Grant Weinberg, as you can tell, not native to the Bay Area, but I do have the privilege of being the VP of Talent Acquisition here at Eikon Therapeutics. Been here about 18 months, and we are at the cutting edge of bio and tech. And enablement is a really important part of the future of talent acquisition with the disruption and the transformation that's happening right now.
Right. Let's go into that in a bit more detail then. Like, first of all, what to you is recruiter enablement?
So for me, recruiter enablement almost is a parallel to sales enablement, right? Recruiters on a daily basis are being faced with existing processes, delayed processes, meaning I learned that process three weeks ago, but I don't get to use it for a month, 2 months, 3 months, because not all situations happen in the same time frame. And then there is the constant change, whether it's being new legislation, whether it's new technology, whether it's new process, workflow, anything like that. And so how do you enable the recruiters to be operationally excellent throughout the workflow process? And so we talk about TA operations, and I think people have got muddled between operations and enablement. And I have created very distinct organizations, and I'd be happy to share my first experience, which was in my last job, where when I resigned, my boss was still scratching her head, saying, "What is enablement?" But that's another story.
Okay, so how do you segment operations and enablement? Because I absolutely agree that these are terms that are used synonymously and they shouldn't be.
Yeah. So I pretty much have followed the sales model, right? So in sales, you have sales operations. So how do you keep the wheel spinning, right? With the different tools, technologies, processes, and systems. On the enablement side, it's how do I enable the recruiters to be able to use the technology, follow the processes, learn, and stay ahead of the curve, and do that on a regular basis. And so I use the term, we're very good at the silver bullet, right? Go and do some cybersecurity training. It's a 30-minute course, and now you will never open a phishing email again. The reality is, you have to do this regularly. And so, when I first set this up, in fact, I probably made a small error that I got rid of TA operations and rebranded it enablement, and then realized about 18 months in that you need the two of them, right? And so here at Eikon, I have operations, and within operations, I have somebody responsible for enablement. And, we do things like community of practice. So once a month, a topic gets highlighted by the TA team, and the enablement lead then will work with them, create content, and then that content gets posted, and we'll link periodically to that. We also created a TA newsletter. That sounds very archaic, but on a Monday morning, the team walk in and the enablement lead will have created a recap of the previous week. What did we introduce? What are the changes? What are the practices that need to be adopted? Where did we see gaps, right? So the enablement lead is doing regular spot audits on the process, and then building the content. Here's a link to this document. Don't forget, tips and best practices on how to stay, I use the word compliant, but operationally excellent is probably a better term.
Wow, great. Okay. So I have found that a lot of the most forward-thinking people in TA on this subject are in the Bay Area. Do you think that's because there's so much influence from tech startups and scale-ups where sales enablement and like every form of, that's a form of engineering enablement, right? And it's like, it's come from that, presumably. Like enablement teams are more common in general. Do you think that's the link is from that, and that's why it's more evolved where you are?
Yes and no, Adam. I mean, it's a good point. I haven't looked at it that way. I think we've just realized that silver bullet methodology with recruiters, and as Bill Borman always says, I'm a recovering recruiter, right? The reality behind that is recruiters will default to what they know. And a lot of the times when we hire them, we make that's the first mistake, right? Not hiring them, but when we hire them,
Yep.
we bring them on board. We give them 2-3 days of overfaced education on the organization, company, business acumen, department acumen. Here are all our processes. Here's all the HR information you need. And then we drop them in the deep end and we say, swim. And so that recruiter is going to take their default experience and bring it to the fore in order to make sure that they don't drown.
Yes.
And that's where you get, I'll always forget, and I'll share this experience. I always remember doing an audit. I had 35 recruiters, and I said to my enablement lead, I said, I want to do an audit. Let's get them to document their end-to-end recruiting process. So we created a wireframe, and we asked them to complete it. At the end of that exercise, I had 33 different recruiting processes. Every recruiter was running the process their way. Now, that's not to blame the recruiter. That's blaming leadership and operations and enablement void, right, in organizations. So I haven't quite answered your question there, but I've given you where I think I see some of the leaders and my peers driving towards is that if sales have operations and enablement, and we are sometimes aligned with similar practice, right, in how we go to market, then why would we not have operations? And in fact, if you think of sales as operations, enablement, and analytics, and TA has had analytics and operations, but maybe not enablement, and so we're getting that perfect Venn diagram.
Do you, just on that subject, I mean, do you I personally, other than assessment, which you could consider to be like pre-sales qualification type of parallel, I don't see any difference really between B2B sales, especially, and marketing versus talent acquisition. Is that oversimplistic, or do you think it's...
No, for a while, probably about 3-4 years ago, I started to talk about the recruiter profile. And I've tried and I've analyzed other functions in the organization, and I don't think there is a more complex role in the organization, and that therefore undervalues talent acquisition severely. Because if you think of a recruiter, you expect it to be able to do research, you expect it to be able to market use to a candidate or candidates, you expect it to be able to sell, you then be expected to do customer care, right? And then you're meant to be analytical. You tell me a role in an organization, one role that has those 5 attributes, and we could argue there's probably more. And I'm going to be really fair to our recruiting tribe, is none of us went through an MBA to cover all 5 of those functional areas before we stepped into the recruiter seat. So we as a function or businesses as a whole are really setting up recruiters to fail. And so those that rise to the top, again, the Bill Borman hat tip there, right? You've got to look at them and go, what talent that is to be able to have somehow mastered those 5. And it's not always mastering all 5, but it's a good combination of the 5. And so when you assess your talent acquisition team, are you assessing them on like, hey, are you doing 2 of those really well, and how do I enable you to do the others better? Or are you just looking at performance through the traditional metrics of time to hire, cost per hire, acceptance rates, things like that?
I think you're spot on here. It's like, I like sporting analogies. In fact, I like all analogies, but one sporting analogy would be, it's like taking a couple of marathon runners and a javelin thrower, a shot putter, and a 110-meter hurdler, and telling them that they are the decathlon team now, and that they've got to do all the events. It's not really... So segmenting properly with the right skill sets in the right place is really important. Grant,
I'm going to give you one last tip here.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I've had the luxury of doing at Eikon is, when I met with my boss and she said, so, what is your philosophy around rec load? And I said, no more than 10 to 15. And she looked at me and she went, that's a great joke. And I said, no, I'm serious. And she said, but standard is 20 to 25. That was one of the big changes through enablement that I learned, right? Is if you really want a recruiter to do all 5 of those things really well and have great experience for the candidate, the hiring manager, and all stakeholders, consider the volume that somebody can operate at. And the next, the next piece for me is when you bring recruiters on, take 2 weeks to induct them into the organization. Right? If you can take a month, I don't set any objectives other than standard onboarding at the end of your first month, and then, build performance against that. And I think that is where you start to enable a recruiter to be really successful, because something they learn about the ATS on day 3, they're probably never going to use until, month 2 or 3. And so the chances are they're going to get it wrong. There's going to be a lot of noise in the system. You're going to have to scrub data when you come to reporting. So think about how we enable people versus just drop them in and hope they can swim.
Wonderful. Really enjoyed talking to you about this. There's a lot more we could cover, and so hopefully we'll get to do it again and go into some more deeper aspects of it. But I've really enjoyed the way that you've described that, and I'm going to be recommending everybody should listen to this. So Grant, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it.